Some recording. Cool. Okay, so welcome to episode 2 of our Silver Shamrock author interview series. I'm Janine Pipe, one of the co-hosts. I'm a writer, reviewer, blogger, booktuber, podcaster, and press officer for Candisha, and I am joined, as always, by my good friend, Ben.
Hey guys, I'm Ben. I'm an English teacher and bookstagrammer and a book reviewer, and you can find all my stuff at readingvicariously.net.
Thank you. And today we are talking to Kenneth W Cain from Silver Shamrock. So before we get into our questions, could you tell us a little bit about yourself, please, Kenneth?
Well, geez, I'm a writer, editor, graphic designer. I spent a good part of my life in the graphic design industry. Basically, if you go to the grocery store, pretty much everything you've seen, I've had my hands in. So, I did a lot of the packaging for Hershey.
Oh, wow, okay.
So anytime you buy a candy bar, that's me. I had a part in that. So it's kind of a cool, history. But at one point, the job was going under. I had to find a way to go, and I ended up here. This is where I'm at. So that's pretty much me in a nutshell.
Okay, thank you very much. Right, I think we'll jump straight into the questions then. So
Okay.
The first thing that we would like to ask you about is, what can you tell us about your latest release with Silver Shamrock, Death Reborn?
From Death Reborn is it's actually the first thing I wrote when I came back to writing. I went in college, I studied writing quite a bit. I was really interested in it. I just, got sidetracked, I guess you would say. So I wrote this little bitty piece and had one of my friends at work, edit it for me as I was starting out. And it started out as like a 3,000 word story that didn't really achieve anything. And it's been shelved so many times I can't even count. But it's one of those things where I just kept picking away at it. Every couple of years I'd pick it up and I'd pick away at it, and then I'd pick away at it a little bit more. And, because it's one of those like itches you had to scratch. And so it's just kind of come full circle. It's a little bit about how it deals with a lot. I was curious. I've always been curious about the afterlife, what comes after death, if anything. And so this is me talking a little bit about the unlife, which is more about an in-between place between life and death, the afterlife, a place where, entities play chess with us more than anything else, and where time doesn't matter and, everything can bleed into one. It's kind of like, I don't know, it gets compared a lot to Drawing of the Three, Stephen King's Drawing of the Three.
Okay.
And like a Clive Barker feel, which is like, huge insult to those guys because they're, they're incredible writers. But I mean, it's very flattering for me, But yeah, it's just me kind of, I've always been fascinated with what comes after death, always.
Mm-hmm. I'm curious if this is something you said you've kind of been picking at and kind of, coming back to over and over again over the years. Is there something that's happened recently, or is there some reason why like now is the time that you kind of decided to jump in and finish it, or did it just kind of build up to this point?
It's growing as a writer. I mean, editing and writing are really two different things. It's so easy to sit there and pick apart somebody else's story. Sure. But then when it's your own, you're like, oh man, I love this the way it is. And it's really hard to see the same holes. I mean, you see them better as time goes on and you learn more. And really what it was is when I started out, it was more of a vignette. And it was this campground scene where, people die. And I was like, that's not really a full story. It's more like just a vignette. And I gotta figure out what I'm going to do with this. So I set it aside, and then I would find like I always call it a line. I'd see a line and I'd be like, oh, I have this little bit over here I wrote and this little bit, and I could combine these three and it will make better sense. Mm-hmm. And, with a good arc, you want to keep having that rising tension and constantly having conflicts thrown at your characters and everything to build up to the climax. And just over the years, I was never able to get there with that story. Like, I have a bunch of novels that I've written that I've set aside, because you know how it is. You start something and it sounds like a great idea. You're like, oh, 10,000 words in, and then you're like, this is awful.
Yeah.
And then you're just like, shove it away, set it aside, and don't come back to it until you have that better sense of how to handle it. And that's a lot what it was with this one. It was really troubling to get through for a long time, because I could not see that line, like how to get to the end point. From the beginning to the end, I knew what I wanted, but I couldn't see any way that logically made sense. And then after, so you figure I've been doing this for 11 years now, and I wrote that in 2007, the very first bit. So that's 14 years ago.
Yeah.
So it's taken me that long to figure out where this story had to go. And it's kind of like it's horrific, but it's probably more like a dark fantasy with horror elements in it. I like to genre blend quite a bit.
Yeah.
Originally it was meant to just be horror, and I think that was the problem.
Oh, yeah.
So that's why it gets compared to these other stories a lot, is because they were kind of inspiration in a way.
Okay.
And going into that afterlife, the worlds in the unlife, going into those worlds is like kind of a fun little, like Clive Barker's type thing with a lot of his work actually.
Really?
Yeah, definitely. I like that. I like the unlife, that term for it. That's neat. So you said, you spent a lot of this kind of came out too of your kind of just thinking about what comes after death and some of these things. I'm curious too, are there any of your own personal experiences with aspects of death or ghosts or anything like that has played a role in this as well?
So there's a scene in this book, and it's going to sound really wacky. But when I was, it's going to sound really wacky.
Right.
When I was 4 years old, I lived in this extremely haunted house. I mean, like stuff like doorknobs moving up and down, ghost dogs jumping through windows, voices in the unfinished basement saying "get out," like that, like literal, like scary stuff for like a very young kid.
Yeah.
And I remember being in a crib. I was old enough to get out of it on my own at that point. And lightning, there was like a lightning rod outside my window, like close to it. And lightning struck and hit my window and made a skeleton. And, I was terrified, of course. I was 4 years old. I was like, holy crap. So I got out, crawled out of my crib, and I started going to my parents' room. And I remember stopping at the front door for some reason and then opening it. And when I opened it, all the houses, all the trees, everything was gone. It was just this vast expanse of land and storm clouds everywhere. And then all the storm clouds opened up, and there was this huge, giant figure made out of, hundreds of thousands of prisms that talked to me. Now, I don't remember what that figure said. It was just a really weird thing, like an afterlife experience.
Yeah, pretty weird.
Sounds crazy. Sounds really crazy, right? So years go by. My mom's like super religious. I'm not, I consider myself a Christian, but I'm not super religious. But my mom is, and she's like trying to get me to read this religious book, and I'm like, nah, I'm not going to read that. And so months and months and months go on, and finally she's like, just read this one page. And I read this one page, and it's an exact description of that.
Oh my God!
Like to the T, everything. I was like, "Holy crap!"
Yeah.
I had like a near-death experience, or what was it?
Right.
And so I guess that ever since that, I've always been fascinated. So that is like very much in the book.
Wow. Yeah, definitely.
Dramatic effect.
And you said you've seen like shadow people and ghosts and all of that kind of stuff as well.
Yeah, a lot of that stuff is in my my book coming out with Journalstone later this year. It's called Storm Shadows. We moved to the second house. The house we went to after that house was also haunted. And I know, we got so lucky. It was crazy.
Right, yeah.
But when I was only like 4 or 5 years old, and because it was right after that experience that we moved. And I'm exploring the house. There's nothing there. I'm looking for hidden treasures, and I found this in this attic space in this closet. I found this huge stuffed gorilla, and I was like, what the heck is up with this stuffed gorilla? My dad threw it to me. He's like, here, just take it and have fun. And for a while there, I'd wake up in the middle of the night, I'd hear a noise, and I'd turn on my light, and that gorilla would be standing in the middle of the room. So I'd like try to get rid of it. I'd throw it in the trash. In the middle of the night, I'd run downstairs into the garage, and I'd throw it in the trash. And I'd see like shadows moving as I was in the garage, and the light would go out on its own. And then that gorilla kept coming back. I mean, literally, it kept showing up in my closet like all the time. I kept throwing it away, and I was like, "Holy cow, what's going on?" And then one night, I just was going to the bathroom, and I turned on the back porch light, and there's a figure standing there, just a shadow outside the door. And I was like, I thought it was like somebody being a creep. But then later on that night, out from behind my door, this person walked out and just crept over me, a complete shadow. You could see through him and everything, and just started strangling me. And I cried out for my mom, and you could just hear it run away, and that was it. So yeah, that's all in that book. I'm getting like a little goosebumpy.
Yeah, me too. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, that was a terrifying real life experience.
Wow.
You have experiences like that, so like it makes you question the afterlife. I mean, when you have a lot of experiences like that, like what is it? Are these bad entities, or were they good, or what were they trying to convey to me? And it makes you wonder.
Oh, definitely. When you were talking about sort of your world that you've created, was there a sense? I mean, I don't think you could read that without having some kind of thoughts towards, obviously, like Dante's Inferno. And, is it kind of a bit like purgatory? That kind of sense that you.
It is. So, if you were to think about heaven and hell in the sense that they've been portrayed to us all of our lives, my hell is very much different layers. Set up with each layer has its own guardian, which is like somebody who keeps everybody in line to make sure that they don't ever leave that layer, and that they're properly tortured. And one of the main characters in those realms is this guy Darius, who used to have another name when he was alive, but he's changed his name. He has guilt, and he changes his name to distance himself from that real life. And he's kind of like, his layer of hell is kind of like the mail room. People's souls come in, and he sorts them out and makes sure they get to whatever hell they're supposed to go to. And then the unlife is the place, if you think about, the gate to heaven, think about just outside of that gate, the waiting area.
Yeah.
And that's what the unlife is.
Oh, okay.
Right? So you're neither dead or alive. You're just kind of in between.
Yeah, in limbo, waiting to see what's going to happen.
Right. And so a lot of this was like, like I lost a niece at a very young age. That's actually in this book. That like an homage to she died in a car wreck. So just kind of like little homages like that. But it was like, why was she taken so young? What is the reasoning for it? If there is a God, why?
Yeah.
And so that's very much what this is about. Why are certain people this way, and why are certain people that way, and why are they taken so young, or for this reason or for that reason? And so it's all about this like giant like chess match going on that we're unaware of, and that's kind of what this book is. So I always call it like I call it a superhero book, because in the end it kind of is a superhero book.
Cool.
We'll see. See if it's received that way.
Okay. So I've put the next question is this your first actual novel length work with Silver Shamrock? Before it's just been short stories? Yeah.
I had some longer works, but they were a long time ago, and mostly through smaller publishers. I think those might be coming back out through Silver Shamrock eventually. But yeah, this is my first one with Silver Shamrock, my first real long piece of fiction with them.
And how has it been working with Silver Shamrock?
Awesome. I mean, we get me and Ken, like we both have the same name, so it's kind of confusing sometimes. But me and Ken, we get along. We have the same vision. We want to get the best work we can out there with the fewest mistakes. And if we find mistakes, we want to fix them, and we want to continue to make, books as the best we can. And, because, if we were in this for the money, if everybody was in this for the money, nobody would be doing it. You know what I mean? So there's a certain pride in putting out something that does really well.
Yeah.
And that's what you get out of it. You get out what you put in. So you put all this hard work in, and the money that goes into it, obviously. And you're trying to put something out there that makes a difference and makes people want to read, your books, or the authors that you're representing. So Ken's been great that way. He's been very helpful with my fiction. He edits all of my work. And he's not easy on me at all. Everybody thinks that I'm hard on him. I mean, you should see what he does to me. I'm like, don't take it easy on me. I want you to just be brutally honest, and let me know. Because you can go out and find a dozen people to tell, and that's not for everybody. I mean, let's be honest, not everybody can take that, and it's hard.
Mm-hmm.
But you can go out and find a dozen people to tell you your story is great. But it's very hard to find somebody that tells you what's wrong with your story.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Because it's hard to do. It's hard to tell somebody what's wrong with their story. You know what I mean?
Yeah, and especially I think within our business, because we all know each other quite well as well.
Right, exactly.
So if you've got that kind of relation, it's like with beta readers as well. If you've already got a relationship with a beta reader and your mates, buddies, it's harder to be able to say, actually, that bit was really not very good. You should take it out.
Right.
And it's probably the same with editing, and going through and saying, actually, no, this needs to be rewritten. And the story works, but just change this bit. But that ending was shocking. Just change that completely. It's much harder to do that with someone that's a friend.
And that's the thing. Like, Ken went out and got a couple beta readers to look over my book real quick. And I can't thank them enough.
Yeah.
Because the book started out at like 90,000 words. And after reading, what they said, I totally rearranged everything. I cut out like 15,000 words. I added in 5,000 new words because it all made better sense. You know what I mean? Like, sometimes that's so helpful, but you have to be open to it. If you're not open to it and you're just like, no, I'm very resistant. I trust my own way, and you're never going to grow as a writer.
No, that's right.
That's really what both sides are, editing and writing. It's about growing in each, and they work separate from each other,
Definitely.
If that makes sense.
Yeah, it does. And it's so true how, like, even because I know you've been on obviously both sides of it, and how, as an editor, you're looking at someone else's work and you can see all these things, but how hard it is to do that for yourself with your own stuff. It's just like you always need somebody else to look at it.
But once somebody looks at it and you see it, you're like, holy cow, I cannot believe I missed this. And that's what it literally was. It was like all this repetition that I was just overlooking. And I was like, oh, I don't need, and I'm taking out huge tracts of text, just junk, because they just didn't add anything. It just slowed the pacing down so much that the story dragged in those parts. And that made total sense to me, and that's the thing. You gotta have people you trust to tell you that kind of stuff, and that's not easy to find. You see like all these circles that have developed over the years in the genre, and it's because they trust each other's opinions.
That's right. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Well, let's talk about some of your short stories real quick. I know you've got a lot out there over the years that you've written. Are there any particular that stand out to you as some of the favorites that you've written?
Oh boy. I have to pull my list. I don't even remember half of this.
Or even like, either your favorites or just ones that like, hey, I want to read a short story. I've never read Kenneth Cain. Where should I start? What's a good short story to start with? Something along those lines.
So a lot of the stories that I like probably are not people's favorites.
Okay. Both the opposite.
So I have like fascinations with loss. Obviously, if I have fascinations with the afterlife, I have fascinations with loss and grieving and being alone, isolation. And one of my favorite short story collections is Embers. I always tell people if they want to start reading me to read that first. That's through Crystal Lake. And I love these stories that are in here, The Chamber and Valerie's Window and A Window to Dream By. Those are like some of my favorite stories starting off that collection.
Mm-hmm.
So that's what I would say is, the Chamber is about a guy who was worked for Nazi Germany during the Holocaust, and he's coming back for the first time to kind of deal with his past. So it's a pretty powerful story, I think. Valerie's Window was actually inspired by a local event where some guy held a bunch of young women captive for 5 years, and they didn't even know any better because they were so young when he took them.
Oh my goodness.
So it's about, what kind of mindset goes into that. It's kind of, so some people get confused and they say, this is just your typical zombie story, because when she looks out the window, she sees zombies. But it's not at all about zombies. It's about her mental, something wrong in her head because of this guy's programming.
Right.
So, and then A Window to Dream By is about a guy who sees like a octopus woman in the clouds.
Wow, I like the sound of that one.
More on a sexual side, so.
Yeah. Oh, okay. Awesome.
Yeah.
Okay. We've kind of already touched on this a little bit, talking about some of your editing work. So the question was about what advantages and disadvantages are there when you're a prolific writer and an editor on both sides of it? So what are the advantages of being an editor within your writing, and what are the advantages of being a writer within your editing, and vice versa with the disadvantages?
Well, I think the biggest advantage is if you look at the writers I've worked with some of the biggest in the industry now in our genre.
Yeah.
And there's just a wealth of knowledge in these people. I mean, so I have this old saying that I've said all the time, that every story you read is a lesson, good or bad. You could read the worst book and there's something to learn there. You could read the best book and there's even more to learn from. But having worked with these people and seeing how they carry themselves and how they handle, like when you have an issue in their stories, how they handle it, and just their writing styles in general. Like they talk about read wide.
Yeah.
Reading, without a doubt, helps your writing. I mean, that's
definitely.
That's the thing about editing, is you're being forced not only to read but to evaluate.
Yeah.
And when you're in that mindset of evaluating sentence structure, like things you don't normally think about when you write a story, like how a paragraph looks on the page and how it flows into the next paragraph. I use this analogy a lot where I say it's like the opening ceremony to the Olympics, the torch ceremony.
Yeah.
So you have that torch and you're carrying it along, and if you drop it, then it's all over, right?
Yep.
So you got to carry that torch, and then there's that next handoff, and that's got to be precise. And then that person runs it to the next person, and then they got to hand it off again. And you're always rising tension, as you get closer and closer to the stadium in that brazier, where that last person has to light it. And that's very much like how a short story works for me, just constantly a handoff from sentence to sentence. And you can see these people who've been doing this for so long, people pour praise on them for a reason.
Yeah.
Their sentences flow together so beautifully sometimes that you just have to sit there and take a step back and go, wow, this is amazing. And so having that is a huge advantage to me as a writer, because it's informed my own writing so much. But it's also an advantage coming back to editing, because now I know. You know what I mean? Now I know how to do it because I've figured it out. It's kind of like when you get the Rubik's Cube and you're like, I can't figure this thing out. And then somebody shows you. And you go, now I know. I can show anyone how to fix the Rubik's Cube. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
And that's really what it is. It's like, and maybe I don't do it as well as them, or maybe I do it better. Who knows? It doesn't even matter. It just matters about constant growth. Like to me, I never want to settle. I don't want to settle at being, this level editor and this level writer. I want to constantly grow and become the best I can.
Mm-hmm.
So I always talk about being able to write the better story. That's what it's all about. Tomorrow I want to write the better story, and then the day after that I want to write a better one, and then after that a better one. Constantly, upping your game.
Oh, definitely. That's it. And from experience, I would say that you are revered within the community for your editing work as well. And I'm not just saying that because we're talking to you.
Well, thank you.
But because I'm very good friends with Glenn Rolfe and Hunter Shea,
okay.
and know when you did, I know you've edited lots of their stuff, and I know that when Glenn put Survive with Me out, that you worked with him with that, and people will say that they want to go to you because of those standards, that they know that if they go to you, yes, you might rip a story apart, but it's because it needs it, and the finished product will be so much better for it. So there's definitely a trust in the genre for you.
Yeah, that's incredible. I mean, I appreciate hearing that. I mean, you don't hear that kind of feedback very often, So, but yeah, it's been great. Like, that's the thing, though. You get to work with so many great writers like that, like those guys, and you learn so much. I mean, honestly, you do. I mean, the editing thing was all an accident for me, if I'm being honest. I was doing a critique of somebody's short story, and they're like, "Hey, I'm gonna, recommend that you edit Tales from Lake 5." It's like, okay, sure, whatever, and then I got it, and I did it, and then it just kept happening. Like, people kept coming to me and coming to me and coming to me, and so I'm very grateful for that, and then I ended up with Ken at Silver Shamrock, and it's hard not to be grateful for that, now if I could just get my writing to be like that. But yeah, it's fun. It's great working with people and like getting to learn their styles, and there's so many different styles out there. It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, actually, to take it and then kind of back to your own writing, I was curious about how you are as a writer. Are you one of those who likes to plot everything out very carefully? Do you find yourself kind of winging it more as you go and then going back at it? What's kind of your style, would you say, as a writer?
So I'm a total pantser. I mean, 100%. Okay. I have all these notes. I have the Apple Notes app, and I dump notes in there like crazy. I have folders and folders and folders of little ideas, and I don't even know why I keep them, because I remember almost all of them. And eventually, like 2 or 3 or 4 of those ideas will come together, and I'll be like, oh, that would make a cool story, and I'll just put myself in the world, and it's very much just watching it happen as it unfolds. I might have an idea where I want it to end, what goal I'm trying to achieve, what I want the theme to be. Like sometimes I know, like I'm working on one now that's about sort of a vampire, and I know what I want it to be. Yeah, it has to do with this island, a very bad island with a very bad man, and so I know where I want to go with it. This guy feeds off of like babies. I mean, I want to make it gruesome, and I'm trying to do that in a way that doesn't offend people. So, but I know what I want, because I want it to be horrific. I mean, vampires are horrific creatures, and I want it to be scary. And but I'm very much the main character. I forget her name because I haven't worked on it in a few weeks because I've been really busy. But she lands this plane on this island, crashes it, and she's going to be, involved with this, maybe possibly have a kid that she has to protect, kind of thing. So that's how, that's the conflict. Going to try to establish it early on, and just make a really scary vampire. That's the whole thing. Like, people talk about like, vampires can't be scary anymore, or they can't. What did they do in Twilight? They like glittered or something.
It's all wrong.
But you can make them scary, though. They can glitter and still be scary. Maybe it didn't work in that, but I mean, those books sold tons. So you got to be happy for that person, and you got to go, what can I do that's better? What can I do that's scarier? And so that's the thing. I put myself in her shoes, and I go, what would it be like to crash land a plane on an island with a vampire on it?
Pretty scary. Yeah.
That sounds awesome. I'm already getting excited just thinking about it, though. So do you do like with the short stories that you've written over the years and things like that, when you're writing short stories or you have these ideas for stories, is it kind of more like, okay, I have this cool idea, let me figure this out, write it out? Do you also, like, there's submission calls and certain things, do you try to write towards calls sometimes, or is it just like, here's stories that I'm writing and some of them might actually fit in with what's already out there?
So I have all these ideas, and I have several short stories that I've, like, hundreds that I've started that I've kind of abandoned because they didn't work out,
Sure.
I used to keep them in a folder called like the folder of lost hopes and dreams. I think it was called. And I would dump literally like probably like 900 stories in there now. And then, you know, occasionally I'll see a call and it'll be like, you know, for a theme that I've touched on, I'll be like, well, I wonder if I can pull up that old story and make it work.
Mm-hmm.
And, you know, often it doesn't work out. So I end up not submitting. But when it does work out, you know, I'm like, oh, you know, maybe this will be a good one. You never know. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
But I try not to write too much for, you know, themed anthologies. I try to write the story that is calling to me. Like I kind of just sit here and I go, what's calling to me right now?
Mm-hmm.
And I'll focus all my attention on that. And that might be different. You know, it might not be consecutive days. So that's unfortunate because it really puts off the longer fiction. But you know, certain worlds, like it's kind of like going on a vacation. I'm like, where do I feel like going on a vacation today? And you know, I'm going to go to deep space and take on, you know, this alien and kill it. And that will be my day. And, you know, it's a total adventure to me because I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know if I'm going to survive or if I'm going to, you know, defeat the alien or if I'm going to die. And so that's what's fun for me is that, you know, not knowing where I'm going to end up. And then, you know, if I wrote for every theme, then I would really put those shackles on and be constrained. And I tried to do that early on and it just didn't work because I would force the story, you know? And I think that's what happens a lot is you see a really restricting theme like that and then people write for it and they, you know, you have to really constrict yourself. You know, you're in these guidelines and it's easier to just write a story and find out where it fits.
Yeah, definitely. So,
you know, there's a lot of calls out there now. There's not many that are pro, but you know, pro rates, or as we call them, pro rates.
Yeah.
But at the same time, you know, you just kind of collect your you know, your arsenal of stories and then find where they fit. And if they don't work out, they don't work out. You can there's so many options now. Like you could, you know, put out your own short story collections or find a good publisher for them. You know, I've been very fortunate with that. You know, so that's kind of my approach on it.
Okay.
I think I'm the exact opposite in that I'm such a procrastinator that if I just make up my own stories on the fly, then they just I just wouldn't write anything. So I'm still a pantser in that I kind of when I've got a story, I don't know where it's going most of the time, and I just sit and write. But I like to be inspired by the calls. So I don't tend to find, but then I'm still, you know, I've only been writing for a couple of years, so maybe it's because I'm still quite new to it, but I don't tend to find them so constricting. It's like, oh, that's an idea. And also for me, that's a deadline, because I find if I haven't got a looming deadline, then I'm like, oh, I've got loads of time. And then I just don't do it. Whereas if it's like, right, you need to write a haunted house story set in England and you've got a week to do it, go. I'll sit and do it.
Well, you know, I think there's no wrong way of doing it. You know, I think that everybody has their own way and you have to find out what works for you. Like I pay very close attention to what, you know, some of my predecessors say that they do, like Jonathan Mayberry and Joe Lansdale, people like that are always giving advice on Facebook that you can see their process. Yeah. Now, my process doesn't match either of those, you know what I mean? And those guys have both been very successful, but that doesn't mean anything. I mean, that just means that I have a different approach to it. And, you know, I don't think there's any wrong way to do it. No. The secret is just repetition. You know, put your butt in the chair and fingers on the keyboard, start working and get it done and, you know, get the story out. And if the story's crap, set it aside for a while, come back to it. Yeah. If it has potential, then, you know, edit it the next day and edit the next day until you don't see the line. As long as you see the line going all the way through the end, keep working on it and try to make that line as clean as possible. And then if you lose it, put it aside and just don't throw it out. Just keep it and wait and see, you know, because like I said, you know, from Death Reborn, I've thrown it away maybe 36 times. So, I mean, you think about that and then, you know, I finally just found the right solution. You know? And sometimes it comes to you when you least expect it. You know, you're sitting there watching TV and you're like, wait a minute. Yeah. Sorry about this. And that makes sense now.
Oh, definitely. Yeah, but I could be doing something completely unrelated and I'll be like, oh, that's a brilliant scene. I need to. And I'll be like, oh, I've got nowhere to write it down. No. I've got to try and remember that now.
Yeah, I mean that's the whole thing. Is I'm very meticulous about keeping every idea I have, and probably not of them. Probably a lot of them are. I make these posts on Facebook a lot, like huge long posts, and then I delete them and save them in that folder because you never know. Like maybe I'll write like a self-help book someday or something. I don't know, but I don't post them because I don't know. I hate putting certain stuff out there online. I like putting my dogs out there because they're funny and cute and everything. And I like putting writing advice out there when it really resonates with me and talking about stories that resonate with me. But nowadays there's so many things that you can get caught up in responding to, and I try to stay away from this negativity. And I got caught up in it for a while for obvious reasons, but I try to stay away from that negativity and keep things positive because I think that's what there's a balance to life in a way, and I try to stay on that positive side as much as possible.
Definitely, that's it.
Yeah.
Okay, who are your own favorite writers, and have they influenced your work at all?
So everybody always gives credit to King, right? Because you have to.
Yeah.
So,
it's the law.
Yeah, I mean, I was working when I started getting into writing horror. I was working the graveyard shift at Pepperidge Farms, putting cookies in the you get them in those little white cups. So it was like literally like gathering cookies, just like this repetitious stuff. So I was always on call, and I ended up like there's nothing to do in the middle of the night. There's no TV on. This is back in the day too. So I started picking up Stephen King novels. After I read a whole bunch of Edgar Allan Poe's short stories. My parents had a whole collection of Edgar Allan Poe, and I was just fascinated with Edgar Allan Poe. So you got to say that he's a huge inspiration. And then, the only TV on at that late at night was The Twilight Zone. And even though it's a TV show, the writers on there with their stories, I mean, legends, all of them. And so I got into King, I got into Barker. I mean, Clive Barker is, amazing. But, nowadays, I'd say Joe Hill. I love Joe Hill's work. Jack Ketchum. I've actually had a conversation with Ketchum about how I love how like he just drops you right into action and you're just going, right off the bat, and man, what a powerful opening for The Girl Next Door. I mean, it doesn't get much better than that. My favorite book, Frankenstein.
Oh, okay.
So I love, Mary Shelley and Shirley Jackson, of course. And just so many people. I mean, there's just I can go on and on and on about the list of people that I, now, because I've read so many works. Like Stephen Graham Jones is an amazing writer. I love his first-person stories. I think that there's a huge lesson there for every writer, and to the way he puts you into another person. Just amazing. John Langan, The Fisherman, was like an amazing book. There's just so many. Like I said, there's a lesson in every book. I mean, even the bad ones. There's so many good writers out there right now of incredible fiction. It's just hard to read it all. It's hard to find the time to read it all.
Yeah, we know that feeling. Being reviewers as well. It's like, but those are review books. I think for me, I love Glenn and Hunter. And Jonathan Jans as well. They are like my most favourites. But someone who's fairly new to me and I'm just devouring as much as possible is Tim Meyer. And I think that his style of writing is just beautiful, and the way that he merges kind of like into the thriller genre as well. I think Tim Meyer is going to be someone that people are talking about in the same breath as maybe not King, but along those lines in a few years' time.
I'm working on one of his books right now, Malignant Summer. It's a really big one, and it's fun. So I think if you like Tim's work, you'll like it. It's long though. I prepare to set aside a couple of months for this one. Last I checked, it was like 200,000 words or something like that. So it is very long.
Awesome.
And how's that to edit when it's that long?
It's a lot for a while there. So I was editing Wormwood and Malignant Summer and Dead Daughters all at the same time. And so I contacted Tim. I was like, all I see every day is Tim Meyer. Like, what what the heck? And he's laughing, I was like, I gotta find somebody else's work to work on. So, the thing is you see patterns when you're working like that. You see patterns, that they, like everybody has things they do, like words they rely on, or phrases they rely on, or little gimmicks that you rely on, and you don't even realize that you're hitting on them until somebody highlights it for you, and a whole page is full of the word suddenly, and you're like, what the heck? What did I do? What was I thinking? But when somebody like illustrates it for that, it's like a slap in the face. And you're like, oh, now I get it, And so I think that's the interesting thing that came of that, having to work on so much of his fiction at once.
Mm-hmm.
Seeing, work that was, refined a different way than this one, because some of those older books have been through other editors.
Yes, yeah.
So it was interesting to see the differences and everything. But I think everybody's going to like. I mean, obviously, Wormwood and Dead Daughters are good books. So I think Malignant Summer is going to be one that people really like.
Awesome.
So one of my next questions was going to be, is there a subject that you haven't written about that you really want to explore? Which, you said you've got 900 stories in this folder. I don't know if that's true. Or maybe a subject that you want to come back to, or, something along those lines. Like, what's a subject you just really want to dive into maybe, or you'd like to explore more? And then also kind of on the other end, are there any subjects that you wouldn't consider delving into because they're just not either something you're interested in, or you think they just go a little too far because of the nature of them?
So I don't really draw lines in fiction. I mean, part of what draws us to horror is, we see bad things happen in this world, and we know what it's like. And sometimes it's just, if you shine a little spotlight on it, it makes it easier to handle. Like some of the things that we've seen just recently have been horrific.
Yeah.
But if you write a story and shine a spotlight on it, why does this happen? What causes this? I think that's what we're trying to look into. And so I think that's what I like. I've been wanting to delve more into, I've always been a big supernatural pulp guy. Like a lot of my stories are supernatural and pulpy, but I've been trying to delve more into the human psychology of it all. Mm-hmm. And some of those older stories you'll see they are very psychological. Like Valerie's Window, very psychological, even though people think it's supernatural, it's not at all. Mm-hmm. It's just about somebody who's been hurt. And so I'd like to delve into that a lot more and get more down to the human monsters, because there's so many of them out there. I mean, we see them every day now,
Oh, yeah.
So there's so many story opportunities. I know a lot of people have been struggling to write during this last year. But if anything, it should be, inspirational to those kinds of stories. There's so much racism in the world right now, so much bigotry. It's amazing that people can't just accept people for who they are. Yeah. And I mean, it just shocks me. But that's why we get into horror.
Yeah.
Horrific things happen every day. And when you get a barrage of those things, they just assault your brain, and you're like, how can people do this? And that's why I think that's why I write sometimes, is to try to find out why. How can it be so bad? How can people do awful things? And everybody does things that they regret, and bad things, and some worse than others. But how do those things add up to where they get to? Like we just had a guy. I don't even know if it was the guy or the wife, or there was a family they just found dead right in our town.
Oh my goodness!
It's murder-suicide. 2 young kids dead, and right there is a story. I mean, then really, Jack, Ketchum Dallas, his Girl Next Door is based on a true story. And
it is, yes, yeah, that's right. Yeah.
And I think that's what we do, is we see something like that, and we don't look at it so much as an opportunity to make money, but an opportunity to tell a story in a way that explains why it happens. And hey, maybe we can prevent it. You know what I mean? Maybe this will make sense to somebody, and it will stop it or something. I don't know. It's so I don't really like to draw limits. I think that if you're reading horror, you should expect the worst. Somebody's going to kill a dog or a cat or a young kid, and it's not going to sit well. Something bad's going to happen to somebody that you care about. And that's part of what that soul crushing feeling. Like, I was reading Joe Hill's Horns, not one of my favorite books of his, but still a good one. And there's a scene in there where I actually took the book and threw it across the room. I was like, I'm done reading that. You got to be kidding me.
Yeah.
But that's what we like. We like that connection that we felt with them, that something happens in the book that it hurts us so bad. You know? And that's what I'd like to get in touch more with, is that human side of the horror.
Mm-hmm.
We do scary things for some reason.
Yeah.
Have you, in your work and when you're wanting to dig down more to that human side, do you still find yourself wanting to add, even if it's not supposed to be a supernatural layer or anything like that, do you find yourself kind of going, like lending some of those, or do you ever write just like true crime serial killer kind of stuff? Or is there always that kind of fantasy supernatural element going on?
So I love the supernatural because I've seen so many weird things that are unexplainable. I mean, like, just weird. And so I love that. I love it. But when I wrote A Season in Hell, it's just a little novelette that out through Crystal Lake Publishing. There's no supernatural side to that at all. But I did add things. It's a baseball story. I mean, I shouldn't say that. It's a horrific human story about racism and sexism in the wrapper of baseball. Because I grew up playing baseball. I played baseball until I was like 37 years old. Like, big leagues, not big leagues, but, leagues that are, single A equivalent and stuff like that. So I played baseball against some incredible baseball players. So I know the game pretty well. And it's, it's not the most exciting game. But I wanted to write a story about a woman playing baseball in the minor leagues in the 90s. And it's kind of like my Jackie Robinson story.
Okay.
So no supernatural element to that at all, but a lot of horrific things that happen. And just kind of around that wrapper and kind of, just saying, why is it such a big deal that a woman plays baseball?
Mm-hmm.
Why? It doesn't make any sense to me, So that's why I had that question and I wanted to address it in a story. And a lot of people like that story, and I'm so happy about it, So I kind of do like to write outside of my genre. I guess like Joe Lansdale does that a lot, and I really can appreciate that in him. I know some people like to have different, pseudonyms attached to this genre and that genre, but I just like to go wherever my mind takes me, And so that story came up, and that was the one, and and I got it placed somehow, got lucky. So
is that something that's on its own, or is that a part of a collection? Because I like the sound of that. I love baseball.
It was originally part of Darker Days, and then we felt like it might not jive with the other, go along with the other stories, because they were very supernatural and this one wasn't. I'm not sure if that was the best idea, but yeah, it's a individual book, so it's actually been received pretty well. I think it would have probably done better if we had it part of a collection.
Yeah,
because I think a lot of people in the horror genre don't really appreciate sports, so they see the cover and they go, and it's nothing against that, but it's just the way it is,
Yeah.
So a lot of readers in general don't typically like sports, I guess. I don't know. And so it's painted as a baseball story, but it's really not.
Yeah.
So I think they see the cover and they see what it's about and they go, oh, that's just a baseball story. Not interested. But the people who have taken a chance on it have really appreciated it and really enjoyed that story. And, that's what it's all about. So.
Awesome. Touching, have you finished with your questions on that side, Ben?
Yeah, I'm good.
Yep. So kind of in relation to the no-go zones and the too far, how do you feel about trigger warnings, which seems to be a big thing within not just our genre, sort of within publishing at the moment? What are your feelings on them?
So like I said, I don't find any topic off limits, and I don't mind trigger warnings. I can understand the people who need them and everything, but I kind of am not the kind of person if somebody asks me, what things should I be aware of in this collection? I'll tell you the triggers. If you go, hey, what should I be aware of? I'll tell you everything. But I'm not really one for the trigger warnings. I don't mind them. I'm not really for or against them, and I understand why people need them. There's like I said, there's a lot of bad things that happen to people in the world, and I can't explain that. And I can't even imagine it. And I've been friends with some people who I've just spent weeks like just holding them while they cried, and how do you ever understand somebody else's pain, and how they'll receive something. I just think that when you're in the horror genre, though, you should expect anything. I mean, anything. I mean, when you see the cover for The Girl Next Door and then you go to read it, you don't ever expect where it's going.
Yeah.
I mean, the original cover. I think it's had many covers since, but the original one with that skeleton cheerleader. I mean, you would never expect it to go so dark. And then, I do think that some people have different sets of rules for like what a newer writer can do versus an established one. And that kind of gets muddled up in there somehow, which makes it even worse somehow.
Yeah.
So I don't disagree that I don't disagree with somebody not being comfortable with reading something. I think that's why we have back copy, though. I mean, if you read a back copy and it doesn't sound interesting, then I think you just slide it aside. And if you start reading a story and it bothers you, then why do you have to finish? Nobody's holding a gun to your head saying, finish the book, read it. No one's doing that. And, I think that we're in a time when social media is so important to people. Being liked, having people understand you. And we all have pain. Everybody has pain of some sort. And, some just hide it better. I have pain. I had it pretty well. And I'm not going to criticize anybody for their pain, but certainly having these sounding boards makes it easy for us to get attention. And some of us very much need that attention some days, and sometimes we don't. So I get it. I get it all, and not my cup of tea. But at the same time, I don't criticize anyone for doing it.
Do you read? I mean, you've already said that you like Jack Ketchum. So, do you read a lot of the newer splatterpunk? Is that kind of something that interests you?
So I actually, when I read splatterpunk, I laugh a lot. Like Evil Dead, I laugh through the whole Evil Dead and laugh my ass off. Pardon my French. But I just think it's hilarious. You see like a chainsaw going through someone's head and blood and guts going everywhere. You're like, ah, ah, ah. So to me, it's kind of funny. What I like mostly is the psychological stuff. And I do like a supernatural element. Like The Fisherman is like a perfect book for me. It has that supernatural element, but it's very much about the human side of people. And I think that's what makes it so successful. Mongrels by Stephen Graham Jones. You have the werewolf element, obviously, but it's very much about the human side of it.
Yes.
And that's what I think I'm fascinated with that kind of stuff lately a lot. I just finished the Cipher by Kathy Koja. I listen to an audiobook. I do a lot of, because I edit so much, I do a lot of audiobooks and podcasts. But that book also, a very supernatural element to it, but a lot of human conflict. How we get along with each other and greed. And you know what I mean? It's just amazing. And she is an incredible writer too. I mean, I should have mentioned that earlier. Amazing writer.
Okay, thank you.
All right. So you've kind of touched on this actually at the very beginning. You mentioned the novella that you have coming out in November with was it Journal Stone, you said?
Yeah, Journal Stone, yeah.
Is there anything else that you can share with us about that piece or that you wanted to kind of mention?
So that one is, again, very similar in structure to From Death Reborn, because both deal with the supernatural element that takes us into another world. So it's very much about the shadow people, but then you start to find, they end up in this other world where the head of these shadow people is this guy named Shade, and he feeds off of shadows. So he, goes around at night taking young kids and stealing their shadows and eating them to stay alive. And it's about, So I take you to this other world that's actually in her attic. So I used to, that attic where I found that gorilla.
Yeah.
Such a fascinating attic because there's this huge space. And I was 4 years old, so it made such an impression on my life. So that attic, I just kind of added another world hole to this other world in there. And we used to have these huge storm drains in Chicago, like huge, like 4 or 5 feet that we used to crawl in. We'd go like miles under the ground. So I had like this huge. It was super gross, gray water, super gross. But we were kids catching crayfish and we were curious. And, and sometimes it would get so tight. So I had this huge claustrophobia thing that you see in my stories a lot. But I mentioned those tunnels because I always wondered where, those sewer tunnels, where do they go to, And so that's in it. And it's just about this, these other worlds where, monsters and there's good creatures there too, and trying to protect people. So I think I call them the Kimni, or these the lightning people. And so you have the shadow people and you have the lightning people. Remember I told you the story about the lightning that struck my window and formed a skeleton. It became this character, Spark is what I call him, trying to save this little girl. That's the main character of the story.
Have you you talking about that is making me think about, have you ever written any or considered writing stories that are more for a middle grade or young adult audience? You talk about these like younger protagonists and things like that. I was curious if you have any desire or have written in that kind of place.
I do. I have one. It was originally with another publisher. I started writing this. We were writing this series of middle grade books. And it just never panned out, so we never finished it. But I had written like the introduction book, and then I had written the whole second half of it, for book 4, and it was going to come out, but it never came to fruition. So I kind of set it aside. It's now called Emergence, but it's about a boy who can see ghosts and very Lovecraftian. There's like a Lovecraftian lake creature that him and his friends have to fight. So. And this one is kind of, in a way, it kind of is middle grade because, the characters are very young. But, I never planned that kind of stuff. I just, it's weird because, like, when I get in my world, I just instantly see my characters the way they're supposed to be, whatever, like hair color, everything. Not that those things are important to the story. I just see it. And the thing you do when you write an outline where you have character sheets and you have these, like, I see all that in my head just flowing. Almost like, Terminator data, like when you're looking for Sarah Connor and you see this, stuff scrolling across. It's like that, like I get this like vision of stuff, like just kind of fitting into place. And so I never really planned like the age. It just kind of works out, my character, hey, I'm 13 years old. And I go, okay,
Sure.
And then it's just a matter of telling the story in a way that makes it as realistic as possible. And because you have these supernatural elements that make it impossible to be real.
Yeah.
And you want to make it as real as possible, telling it from that perspective. And I think sometimes, obviously we see these posts where, guys can't write female characters and everything. But really what it is, I think these guys are trying too hard and they're obsessed with, boobs for something, So it's like they end up in every story, you got to talk about them. And I think that's what it is, like some kind of weird obsession or something. But, if you strip that stuff out of there, then the story makes better sense, and the perspective. So I think that's why you see some of these things happen.
Awesome. Well, I think that's all of the questions that we really had. Was there anything else, Ben, that you wanted to ask? Any questions that had come up through the conversation?
No, I don't think so. This has been an awesome conversation.
Oh, thank you.
So just before we finish off, Kenneth, just a couple of things. First of all, was there anything else that you wanted to talk about in regards to your writing that we haven't touched on?
I do have a couple of short stories coming out in charity anthology, so I should mention those.
Yeah.
One is called Nightmares in Yellow. It's a tribute to Joe Pulver, and I think it's supposed to come out soon. And he was a great writer. And his partner Kat is an incredible woman. So I have a story that I submitted that and in that, and also this other one is called Coming Through in Waves, and that is a Pink Floyd. I love Pink Floyd; it's my favorite band. So it's a Pink Floyd tribute charity, and for like crime fiction.
Oh, cool.
But the money goes to good causes, and that's always important. So when you see those guys, I think the pre-order for the Coming Through in Waves is already out, and the other one's supposed to be out later this year. But if you guys see those, buy those books so that the charities get good money. And I just had One of Us come out recently,
Yes.
and that's a charity for Frank Michaels Ayrton, who was a reviewer, a good friend of mine, and who's a member of my local writing group. And that money goes to, and so many writers contribute to that. I mean, so many great writers, even Stephen King.
Yeah.
And that money goes to transplant, the American Transplant Foundation, because Frank needed a new kidney and he wasn't able to get one before he passed. So pick up that one and make sure these charities get lots of money.
That's huge as well, isn't it? It's a big like doorstop of a book.
200,000 words. And I tell you what, the authors, they all sent in like their best possible work. When a story didn't work out and I had to reject it, a lot of those authors sent in new stories that were even better and worked better. So, I mean, just, and Josh Mailerman and Paul Tremblay and I mean, all those guys, they all sent in stories. All the people that Hunter.
Yep.
And Tim. They're all in it. Yeah. Chad Leslie.
Yep.
I can't think of them all off the top of my head, but so many well-known writers contribute, and men and women both, and they just knocked it out of the park. I mean, I'm so thankful to all of them. They all worked so hard on it, and it's an incredible book. I hope it gets more attention than it's getting, because it deserves so much more of it. And it's for a good cause. So
definitely. Was it Todd Kiesling that did all the design on it as well? Is that right?
Yeah. Yes. It was actually his idea. We were planning to do something locally, and then Frank passed, and we were just like, we were so dejected by it. We were just like, oh man, it was such a shock. And Todd goes, instead of us doing this anthology we had planned, let's make a tribute to Frank. Then when word got out, it was just pouring in. I mean, he was just very well liked in the genre. And I've had so many people come to me with personal stories, like reviewers saying, hey, when I started out, Frank just sent me a message, said, hey, here's, a bit of advice, and, I hope it works out for you. And, just the fact that he took time out of his time to do that, he was just that kind of guy. So great guy and a great cause,
Well, we'll make sure that we've got all sort of links down below in the notes, and to plug all of that kind of stuff as well. Okay, just one final thing then. Where can people find you? Where do you lurk in social media?
So I'm at KennethWCain.com is my website, and I have all my social media links on there. I spend most of my time on Facebook. I try Twitter and Instagram, but I'm awful at it. So people follow me on both, and I'm like, if I follow them back. So if you follow me, I'll probably follow you back, as long as I can tell you're a writer and not some bot. Yeah. Can't tell I'll block you. I got to be honest. But I just I like posting pictures on Instagram, so I put all my dog pictures on Instagram. On Twitter, I make political posts sometimes, so you got to forgive me. And but most of the time, I just spend time on Facebook because it's just so much easier for me. I hate social media. I hate it. But I do it. We got to do it, and
it's a necessary evil, isn't it, for promoting and connecting?
I just don't like negative things, and you see a lot of negativity on all social media, and people arguing. I mean, it's like sometimes we just got to have something to argue about, it seems.
Oh yeah.
And I don't like that. I just like to, I like a very peaceful life. You know what I mean? And I love getting to know people that I don't know, and interacting with people from other countries and other experiences, and that stuff is really valuable to me because it informs my writing. I like to get to know people's experiences. Yeah. But when it starts devolving into this, negativity match of who can outdo each other, and then you get the trolls coming in and trying to make it worse, I'm just like, Yeah. I left middle school a long time ago, so.
Oh yeah. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on. It's been wonderful to talk to you, and I think that Ben and I have both learnt a lot of new things about you as a person, as a writer, and there's certainly a whole lot of things that we're going to be going and checking out now. So thank you ever so much.
Thank you for having me. I appreciate it. Appreciate it so much.
Okay. Cheers. Thank you. Bye.
Bye.
Bye.